What if the person you've been secretly helping for months turned out to be someone who could change your entire world? What if one act of kindness led to a discovery that would challenge everything you thought you knew about yourself? This is the story of Marcus, a man whose quiet generosity became the key to unlocking a connection he never saw coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus Chen had always been the type of person who preferred shadows to spotlights. At 31, he worked as a night shift security supervisor at Riverside General Hospital in Portland, Oregon. His job was simple: make sure the building stayed safe, the equipment stayed secure, and the few overnight staff had everything they needed. It wasn't glamorous work, but it suited him perfectly. The hospital at night was peaceful, almost meditative. Long corridors bathed in soft fluorescent light, the gentle hum of medical equipment, and the occasional sound of footsteps echoing from the emergency department. Marcus had been doing this job for nearly 4 years, and in that time, he'd developed routines that kept him grounded. He'd walk his rounds every 2 hours, check on the various departments, and spend the quiet moments in between reading or catching up on administrative paperwork. He wasn't antisocial exactly, but he'd learned early in life that he functioned better with space and silence. Growing up as the middle child in a family of 7, he discovered that being the quiet one meant being overlooked, and being overlooked meant peace. The night shift suited his temperament. During the day, Riverside General buzzed with activity. Doctors rushing between patients, nurses coordinating care, families navigating the stress of medical crises. But after 11 p.m., the hospital transformed into something entirely different. It became a place of calm vigilance, where Marcus could do his job without the noise and chaos that made him feel overwhelmed. His route took him through every floor of the hospital, from the basement storage areas to the administrative offices on the 7th floor. He knew every corner, every room, every quirk of the building. The elevator that sometimes stuck between the 3rd and 4th floors. The bathroom door on the pediatric ward that didn't close properly. The vending machine in the surgical wing that occasionally dispensed free snacks if you hit the right combination of buttons. It was during one of his routine rounds, about 6 months ago, that Marcus first noticed her. Dr. Elena Vasquez, according to the nameplate outside her office on the 5th floor. She was a child psychologist who worked with pediatric patients dealing with trauma and anxiety. Her office was tucked away at the end of a quiet hallway, far from the main traffic of the hospital. The first time Marcus saw her, it was nearly 2 in the morning. She was sitting at her desk, surrounded by case files and legal pads covered in handwritten notes. The warm glow of her desk lamp created a small circle of light in the otherwise dark office. She looked exhausted, running her hands through her dark hair as she reviewed what appeared to be session notes. Marcus didn't think much of it initially. Medical professionals working late wasn't unusual. But as the weeks passed, he began to notice a pattern. Dr. Vasquez was there almost every night he worked, often staying until 3 or 4 in the morning. She'd arrive sometime after midnight, always carrying a large messenger bag and a thermos of coffee, and she'd work steadily until the early hours of the morning. There was something about her dedication that struck Marcus. In his years at the hospital, he'd seen plenty of doctors work long hours, but this felt different. Dr. Vasquez wasn't rushing through paperwork or catching up on administrative tasks. She was deeply focused, completely absorbed in whatever she was working on. Sometimes he'd see her practicing presentations in her office, speaking to an empty room as if she were addressing a conference full of colleagues. Marcus found himself timing his rounds to coincide with her presence, not in a creepy way, he told himself, but out of professional courtesy. It was his job to ensure the safety and security of everyone in the building, and Dr. Vasquez was often the only person on the 5th floor during his shifts. He'd walk past her office, noting that she was safe and secure, and continue his rounds. One particularly cold February night, Marcus noticed that Dr. Vasquez's office was darker than usual. As he approached, he realized that half the fluorescent lights in the hallway had burned out, leaving her area dimly lit. When he looked into her office, he could see her squinting at her paperwork, clearly struggling with the inadequate lighting. The next night, Marcus brought a small desk lamp from the hospital supply closet. He left it outside her office with a simple note. Thought you might need some extra light. Security. He didn't sign his name or leave any way for her to thank him. He just wanted to help. 2 nights later, the lamp was on her desk, providing the warm, focused light she needed for her work. Marcus felt a small surge of satisfaction seeing it in use. It was a minor thing, but it made her workspace more comfortable, and that felt important to him. This became the beginning of a pattern that would define the next several months of Marcus's life. He started noticing small ways he could make Dr. Vasquez's late-night work sessions more comfortable, always anonymously, always without expecting recognition or thanks. When he noticed that the vending machine closest to her office was frequently out of order, he began leaving snacks outside her door. Nothing elaborate, granola bars, packets of nuts, fruit cups, just small things that might help sustain her through her long nights. When the heating system on the 5th floor malfunctioned during a particularly cold week in March, Marcus made sure that maintenance prioritized the repair, and in the meantime, he left a small space heater near her office. Dr. Vasquez never seemed to question these mysterious gifts. Marcus would see her using the items, and occasionally he'd catch glimpses of what looked like gratitude on her face as she discovered something helpful waiting for her. But she never tried to figure out who was leaving them, and Marcus never revealed himself. There was something pure about this arrangement that appealed to Marcus deeply. He could help someone without the complications of social interaction, without having to explain himself or navigate the complex dynamics of relationship building. He could simply see a need and meet it, anonymously and efficiently. As the months passed, Marcus began to feel more invested in Dr. Vasquez's work than he'd ever felt about anything in his own life. He started researching child psychology, reading articles about trauma therapy and child development during his breaks. He learned that Dr. Vasquez specialized in working with children who had experienced abuse, neglect, and other serious traumas. Her late-night sessions weren't just paperwork. She was developing new treatment protocols, writing research papers, and preparing presentations for national conferences. Marcus found himself deeply moved by the importance of her work. These weren't just case files she was reviewing. They were the stories of children who needed someone to believe in their capacity to heal. Dr. Vasquez was that someone, and she was pouring herself into the work with a dedication that Marcus found both inspiring and concerning. He began to worry about her well-being. She was clearly pushing herself to exhaustion, working far more hours than anyone should. There were nights when he'd see her fall asleep at her desk, her head resting on a pile of case files. On those occasions, Marcus would quietly adjust the temperature in the building to make sure she stayed comfortable, and he'd check on her more frequently to ensure she was safe. The relationship, if it could be called that, was entirely one-sided in terms of direct interaction. Marcus knew Dr. Vasquez's routines, her work habits, her preferences for coffee and snacks. He knew that she preferred classical music while she worked, that she always kept a small, succulent plant on her windowsill, and that she had a habit of talking to herself when she was working through particularly complex problems. But Dr. Vasquez knew nothing about Marcus. She didn't know his name, his face, or anything about the person who had been quietly supporting her work for months. To her, he was simply a benevolent mystery, someone who seemed to understand what she needed and provided it without asking for anything in return. This anonymity felt safe to Marcus, but it also created a strange intimacy. He was witnessing her most dedicated, vulnerable moments. The late-night struggles with difficult cases, the preparation for important presentations, the quiet determination to make a difference in the lives of traumatized children. He felt connected to her purpose, invested in her success, protective of her well-being. There were moments when Marcus wondered if he should reveal himself, introduce himself properly, and transform their anonymous relationship into something more conventional. But every time he considered this possibility, he talked himself out of it. What if she felt uncomfortable knowing that someone had been watching her work? What if she interpreted his help as invasive rather than supportive? What if revealing himself destroyed the pure, uncomplicated nature of what they had? So Marcus continued his routine, month after month. He'd arrive for his 11 p.m. shift, conduct his rounds, and spend the quiet hours ensuring that Dr. Vasquez had everything she needed to do her important work. It had become the most meaningful part of his job, possibly the most meaningful part of his life. The turning point came on a rainy Thursday night in late September. Marcus arrived for his shift to find that Dr. Vasquez's office was empty, which was unusual for a weeknight. Her light wasn't on, her thermos wasn't on the desk, and there were no signs of her recent presence. At first, Marcus assumed she was taking a rare night off, catching up on sleep that she desperately needed. But when Friday night came and her office remained empty, Marcus began to worry. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. By the following Monday, when there was still no sign of Dr. Vasquez, he decided to investigate. Using his security access, he checked the hospital's staff directory and discovered that Dr. Elena Vasquez had taken a leave of absence. The directory didn't provide details, but it indicated that she would be away from the hospital indefinitely. Marcus felt a strange sense of loss that surprised him with its intensity. For months, Dr. Vasquez's presence had been the anchor of his nights, the purpose that made his work feel meaningful. Without her there, the hospital felt hollow, his rounds felt mechanical, and the quiet hours stretched endlessly with no sense of mission or connection. He found himself walking past her empty office multiple times each night, hoping irrationally that she might return unexpectedly. The desk lamp he'd given her months ago was still there, unplugged and pushed to one side. Her succulent plant was beginning to wilt from lack of care. The whole scene felt abandoned, like a life interrupted mid-sentence. After a week of empty nights, Marcus made a decision that felt both completely logical and utterly terrifying. He would find Dr. Vasquez and check on her well-being. Not to intrude on her privacy or to force an interaction, but simply to ensure that she was okay. If she was dealing with a personal crisis or health issue, maybe there was some way he could help, even if she never knew it was him. Using the hospital's administrative database, Marcus was able to find Dr. Vasquez's home address. It felt like crossing a line, using his security access for personal reasons, but he justified it as a wellness check. If something had happened to her, if she was in trouble or needed help, someone should know. The address led him to a modest duplex in a quiet residential neighborhood about 20 minutes from the hospital. It was the kind of place where young professionals lived when they were saving money or just starting their careers, well-maintained but not flashy, with small front yards and shared driveways. Marcus drove past the address several times before working up the courage to approach the door. He could see lights on inside, which suggested that Dr. Vasquez was home and presumably okay. But he also noticed that the small front yard was overgrown, mail was piling up in the mailbox, and there were newspapers scattered on the front porch. These were signs that someone was present, but not fully engaged with the world around them. On his third drive-by, Marcus noticed something that made him pull over immediately. There was a moving truck parked in the driveway, and boxes were stacked on the front porch. Dr. Vasquez was moving, and from the looks of things, she was moving soon. The realization hit Marcus like a physical blow. Dr. Vasquez wasn't just taking a leave of absence, she was leaving entirely. Whatever had caused her to step away from her work at the hospital was significant enough that she was relocating completely. And once she moved, Marcus would have no way of knowing where she went or whether she was okay. For the first time in months, Marcus felt genuinely panicked. The anonymous relationship that had given structure and meaning to his life was about to end permanently, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Or was there? That night, Marcus sat in his apartment staring at a box of items he'd collected over the months. Extra supplies he'd intended to leave for Dr. Vasquez, small things that might be useful in her new office, wherever that might be. There were specialized pens that worked well for note-taking, a small ergonomic cushion for her chair, and a few books on child psychology that he'd purchased after researching her field. The box represented months of quiet care, anonymous support, and unspoken connection. It also represented an opportunity, possibly the only opportunity, for Marcus to transform their relationship from something secret and one-sided into something real and mutual. Marcus spent the entire weekend wrestling with the decision. He could drive to Dr. Vasquez's house, knock on the door, introduce himself, and explain how he'd been supporting her work. He could offer to help with her move, provide some explanation for the mysterious gifts she'd been receiving, and see if there was potential for their connection to evolve into something more traditional. Or he could let her go, preserving the purity of what they'd had while accepting that it would end completely. He could return to his routine at the hospital, conduct his rounds without purpose or connection, and carry the memory of Dr. Vasquez as a beautiful secret that no one else would ever understand. The decision, when it came to him, felt both inevitable and terrifying. On Monday evening, before his shift at the hospital, Marcus loaded the box of supplies into his car and drove to Dr. Vasquez's address. This time, instead of driving past, he parked in front of the house, took a deep breath, and walked to the front door. Dr. Elena Vasquez answered the door wearing jeans and a paint-stained sweatshirt, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked tired, stressed, and slightly annoyed at being interrupted. When she saw Marcus, a stranger holding a box, her expression shifted to confusion and mild concern. "Can I help you?" she asked, keeping the door partially closed between them. Marcus felt his carefully prepared words dissolve in his throat. Standing there, looking at Dr. Vasquez in person for the first time, he realized that she was even more striking than he'd thought. But more than that, she seemed fragile in a way that he'd never noticed during his distant observations. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she carried herself like someone who was carrying a heavy burden. "I'm sorry to bother you," Marcus began, his voice sounding strange and formal to his own ears. "My name is Marcus Chen. I work security at Riverside General Hospital." Dr. Vasquez's expression shifted again, this time to mild recognition. "Oh, is there something wrong at the hospital? I'm on leave, so if there's an issue with my office or—" "No, nothing like that," Marcus interrupted quickly. "I wanted to return some things to you, supplies that were left in your office area." It wasn't entirely a lie, but it wasn't entirely the truth either. Marcus held up the box as evidence of his stated purpose. Dr. Vasquez looked at the box, then back at Marcus, clearly trying to understand the situation. "I don't remember leaving any personal supplies at the hospital. What kind of things?" Marcus felt heat rising in his cheeks. He'd anticipated this question, but now that he was facing it directly, his prepared explanations seemed inadequate. "Just some office supplies, books, that sort of thing. I thought you might want them for your new position." "How do you know about my new position?" Dr. Vasquez asked, and now there was a note of wariness in her voice. Marcus realized he'd made an error. If he was just returning forgotten supplies, he wouldn't necessarily know that she was moving to a new job. He was revealing knowledge that didn't fit his stated purpose for being there. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, setting the box down on the porch. "I should have called first, or gone through proper channels. I just wanted to make sure you got these things before you left." Dr. Vasquez studied Marcus for a long moment, and he had the uncomfortable feeling that she was trying to place him in some larger context. Her eyes were intelligent and assessing, the eyes of someone trained to understand human behavior and motivation. "You said your name was Marcus Chen?" she asked. "Yes." "And you work security at the hospital?" "Night shift security supervisor, yes." Dr. Vasquez nodded slowly, and Marcus saw something shift in her expression. Not recognition exactly, but a dawning understanding. "How long have you worked at the hospital, Marcus?" 4 years. "And during that time, you've been familiar with the 5th floor?" Marcus felt his stomach tighten. She was leading somewhere with these questions, and he suspected he knew where. "Yes, the 5th floor is part of my regular rounds." Dr. Vasquez was quiet for several seconds, studying Marcus with an intensity that made him want to disappear. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. It was a small smile, but it was genuine. "You're him," she said simply. "I'm sorry?" The snacks, the desk lamp, the space heater. During that cold week in March, the way the vending machine on my floor always seemed to be restocked right when I needed it most. Dr. Vasquez's smile grew slightly wider. "You're my mysterious benefactor." Marcus felt exposed in a way that was both terrifying and liberating. After months of anonymity, he'd been discovered, and he had no idea how Dr. Vasquez felt about the revelation. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," Marcus said quickly. "I just noticed that you were working so hard, so late, and I thought maybe I could help make things a little easier. I never meant for it to be weird or invasive." "It wasn't weird, Drive," Vasquez said, and Marcus felt a rush of relief. "It was incredibly kind. I've been wondering for months who was looking out for me like that. I even asked some of the nurses if they knew anything about it." "You did?" "Of course I did. When someone is anonymously making your life better, you get curious." Dr. Vasquez looked down at the box Marcus had brought. "And now you're here, returning supplies that I suspect were never actually mine." Marcus nodded, feeling foolish. I wanted to give you some things that might be useful in your new job. Books, supplies, just small things. But I also wanted to meet you properly, to make sure you were okay. Why? The question was direct and honest, and it deserved an equally honest answer. Marcus took a breath and decided to tell the truth. Because your work matters. Because I've watched you pour yourself into helping children who've been through terrible things, and I think what you do is incredibly important. Because you've been working yourself to exhaustion, and someone should care about whether you're taking care of yourself. Dr. Vasquez was quiet for a long moment, processing what Marcus had said. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. Would you like to come in for coffee? I think we should talk properly. Marcus felt his heart rate increase. Are you sure? I don't want to impose, especially if you're in the middle of packing. I'm sure. Besides, I owe you a thank you, and I'd like to understand how this all worked. Dr. Vasquez opened the door wider and stepped aside to let Marcus enter. Her duplex was small, but comfortable, with boxes stacked along the walls and most of the furniture covered in packing materials. Despite the chaos of moving, the space felt warm and lived in. Sorry about the mess, Dr. Vasquez said, gesturing toward the living room. Moving is always more complicated than you think it's going to be. Where are you moving to? Marcus asked, then immediately wondered if the question was too personal. San Francisco. I got offered a position at UCSF's Children's Hospital, heading up their trauma recovery program. Dr. Vasquez moved toward the kitchen, motioning for Marcus to follow. It's a huge opportunity, but leaving Portland is harder than I expected. Marcus felt a complex mix of emotions hearing this news. Pride that Dr. Vasquez was being recognized for her expertise and given opportunities to expand her impact. Sadness that she was leaving, that their connection, whatever it was, would be severed by distance. And underneath both of those feelings, a deeper sense of loss that he didn't entirely understand. That sounds like an incredible opportunity, Marcus said, and he meant it. The children you'll be able to help there, the research you'll be able to do, it's exactly the kind of work you should be doing. Dr. Vasquez paused in the middle of preparing coffee and turned to look at Marcus. How do you know so much about my work? Marcus felt heat rising in his cheeks again. I may have done some research. About child psychology, trauma therapy, your publications. I wanted to understand what you were working on during those late nights. You read my research papers? Some of them. I found your presentation on integrative therapy approaches particularly interesting. Dr. Vasquez stared at Marcus for several seconds, and he couldn't read her expression. Then she laughed, a genuine sound of delight that filled the kitchen. This is unbelievable, she said, shaking her head. Not only have you been secretly taking care of me for months, but you've been educating yourself about my field. Is that weird? Marcus asked, suddenly worried that he'd revealed too much. It's not weird, Marcus. It's extraordinary. Dr. Vasquez poured coffee into 2 mugs and handed one to Marcus. In my entire career, I don't think anyone has ever taken such an interest in supporting my work without wanting something in return. I didn't want anything in return. I know. That's what makes it extraordinary. They moved to the living room, sitting on opposite ends of a couch that was half covered with packing materials. For a few minutes, they drank their coffee in comfortable silence, both processing the strangeness of finally meeting face-to-face after months of anonymous connection. Can I ask you something? Dr. Vasquez said eventually. Of course. Why didn't you ever introduce yourself? All those months, you could have just knocked on my office door and said hello. Marcus considered the question carefully. It was something he'd asked himself many times, but he'd never had to articulate the answer to someone else. I think I was afraid, he said finally. Afraid that if I made it personal, if I introduced myself and created expectations, it would change the nature of what I was doing. I wasn't helping you because I wanted to get to know you, or because I was hoping for something in return. I was helping you because your work mattered and you deserve support. But you wanted to get to know me, Dr. Vasquez said. It wasn't a question. Marcus looked down at his coffee mug, then back up at Dr. Vasquez. Yes, I did. I do. Then why didn't you? Because I didn't think I had the right. You were dealing with incredibly important, difficult work. You were probably already overwhelmed with responsibilities and stress. The last thing you needed was some guy from security complicating your life. Dr. Vasquez was quiet for a moment, studying Marcus with that same assessing look he'd noticed at the door. "Do you think I deserve love again?" she asked suddenly. The question was so unexpected, so direct and vulnerable, that Marcus felt like he'd been hit in the chest. "What? Do you think I deserve love again?" Dr. Vasquez repeated, her voice steady but soft. "After everything I've been through, after all the ways I've failed and struggled, do you think I'm still worthy of someone caring about me?" Marcus set down his coffee mug and looked directly at Dr. Vasquez. There was something in her eyes that suggested this wasn't just a casual question. There was pain there, uncertainty, a deep vulnerability that she was choosing to share with him. "Elena," Marcus said, using her first name for the first time. "Of course you deserve love. You deserve all the love in the world. How can you say that? You barely know me. I know that you dedicate your life to helping children heal from trauma. I know that you work until you're exhausted because you care so much about doing the work right. I know that you're brilliant and compassionate and entirely devoted to making the world better for the most vulnerable people in it." Marcus paused, feeling the weight of everything he'd observed over the months. Anyone would be lucky to love you, and you deserve someone who sees all of that and values it. Dr. Vasquez's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away from Marcus. "My ex-husband used to tell me that I cared too much about work, that I was too intense, that I made everything too complicated. He said I was the kind of person who was easier to admire than to actually live with." "Your ex-husband was an idiot," Marcus said without hesitation. Dr. Vasquez laughed through her tears. "You don't even know him. I don't need to know him. Anyone who could be with you and not appreciate what you bring to the world, anyone who could make you question whether you deserve love, that person was never worthy of you in the first place." They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of the conversation settling between them. Marcus felt like they'd crossed into territory that was entirely different from what he'd expected when he decided to introduce himself. "Why are you really moving to San Francisco?" Marcus asked gently. Dr. Vasquez wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. "Because I needed to start over. Because staying in Portland meant staying close to all the reminders of my marriage, my divorce, all the ways I felt like I'd failed. The job offer was perfect timing, a chance to begin again somewhere new. And now? Now I'm sitting here talking to someone who spent months taking care of me without asking for anything in return. Someone who educated himself about my work because he thought it was important. Someone who tracked me down just to make sure I was okay." Dr. Vasquez looked at Marcus with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Now I'm wondering if I'm running away from something good." Marcus felt his heart racing. "Elena, I don't want to complicate your decision. This opportunity in San Francisco, it's incredible, and you should take it. Your career, your research, the children you'll be able to help, that's all more important than whatever this is between us. What if I don't want to choose between my career and whatever this is between us?" Dr. Vasquez asked, "What if I want to see if there's a way to have both?" Marcus stared at her, not sure he'd heard correctly. "What do you mean?" "I mean that in all my research on human connection and healing, I've learned that the most powerful therapeutic relationships are built on exactly what you've been offering me. Unconditional support, genuine care, and the belief that someone is worthy of love and attention." Dr. Vasquez moved closer to Marcus on the couch. "You've been showing me for months what it feels like to be truly seen and valued. That's not something I want to walk away from. But your job, the job will still be there in a few months. I can negotiate a delayed start date, or I can find something comparable here in Portland. What I can't do is replace what we have." Marcus felt overwhelmed by the implications of what Dr. Vasquez was saying. "Elena, you barely know me. You've known about me for exactly 1 hour. I've known about you for months, Marcus. I've felt your care, your attention, your respect for my work and my well-being. I've experienced what it's like to have someone in my corner who doesn't want anything from me except my happiness and success." Dr. Vasquez reached out and took Marcus's hand. "That's not nothing. That's everything." Marcus looked down at their joined hands, feeling the reality of physical connection after months of anonymous distance. I never expected this. I never imagined that introducing myself would lead to something like this. What did you expect? I thought I'd give you the supplies, make sure you were okay, and then go back to my life knowing that you were safe and successful somewhere else. I thought it would be closure. And now? Marcus looked up at Dr. Vasquez, seeing her clearly for the first time. Not as the distant object of his anonymous care, but as a real person sitting inches away from him, offering him possibilities he'd never dared to imagine. Now I think this might be the beginning of something I've been looking for my entire life without knowing it. Dr. Vasquez smiled, the first completely unguarded smile Marcus had seen from her. Good. Because I've been thinking the same thing. They talked until nearly dawn, sharing stories about their lives, their work, their hopes and fears. Marcus learned that Dr. Vasquez had grown up in a large family in New Mexico, that she'd always felt called to work with children, that her divorce had left her questioning her worth and her judgment about relationships. Dr. Vasquez learned that Marcus had chosen security work because he valued stability and routine, that he'd been taking online courses in psychology and social work, that he'd never been in a serious relationship because he'd never met anyone who made him want to take the emotional risk. As the sun began to rise, they were still sitting on the couch, now much closer together, Dr. Vasquez's head resting on Marcus's shoulder. I should probably let you get some sleep, Marcus said reluctantly. Probably, Dr. Vasquez agreed, but she didn't move away from him. Elena? Yes? Are you really going to consider staying in Portland? Dr. Vasquez was quiet for a moment. I'm going to consider a lot of things I hadn't considered before tonight, including the possibility that the fresh start I was looking for might not require moving across the country. Marcus felt a surge of hope mixed with uncertainty. I don't want to be the reason you give up an incredible opportunity. You're not giving up anything for me, Marcus. You're helping me realize that there are different kinds of opportunities, and some of them might be more valuable than career advancement. Such as the opportunity to build something real with someone who's already proven that he knows how to love without expecting anything in return. Dr. Vasquez lifted her head from Marcus's shoulder and looked at him directly. That's rare, Marcus. That's precious. And I'd be crazy to walk away from it without seeing where it leads. Marcus felt like his chest might explode from the combination of joy, fear, and possibility coursing through him. So where do we go from here? We take it slow. We get to know each other properly, face to face, without any more anonymous gifts or mysterious gestures. We see if what we have in person matches what we built in the shadows. And if it does? Dr. Vasquez smiled and leaned forward to kiss Marcus softly on the cheek. Then we figure out the rest together. 3 months later, Marcus was finishing his shift at Riverside General when his phone buzzed with a text message from Elena. Coffee in 20 minutes? I have news. Marcus had learned that Elena's news was always worth hearing. In the months since their first conversation, she had indeed negotiated a delayed start date with UCSF, giving herself time to explore what was developing between them. She'd also started working part-time at a Portland clinic specializing in children's mental health, allowing her to continue her important work while building their relationship. Marcus met Elena at their usual coffee shop, the place they'd started meeting regularly after that first night in her duplex. She was already there when he arrived, sitting at their favorite table near the window, but something was different about her expression. She looked excited, almost glowing. Good news or complicated news? Marcus asked as he sat down across from her. Good news. Definitely good news. Elena reached across the table and took Marcus's hands. I got a call from Portland Children's Hospital yesterday. They're creating a new position, Director of Trauma Recovery Services. It's essentially the same role I was offered in San Francisco, but here in Portland. Marcus felt his heart leap. Elena, that's incredible. Are you going to take it? I already did. I accepted this morning. Marcus stood up so quickly that he knocked over his chair, drawing stares from other customers. He didn't care. He pulled Elena up from her seat and wrapped her in a hug, lifting her slightly off the ground. I can't believe it, he said into her hair. This is perfect. This is everything you wanted. Not everything, Elena said, pulling back to look at him. But it's everything I need to build the life I actually want. Which is a life where I get to do work that matters, in a city I love, with a person who understands that caring about something deeply isn't a flaw, it's a strength. Marcus felt tears in his eyes. Elena, I love you, Marcus. I love your quiet strength, your thoughtful attention, your respect for my work, and your belief in my worth. I love that you saw me clearly before you ever spoke to me, and I love that you care about making the world better in small, daily ways. I love you too, Marcus said, the words feeling both natural and miraculous. I love your dedication, your compassion, your brilliant mind, and your fierce heart. I love that you make me want to be braver and more engaged with the world. They kissed there in the coffee shop, surrounded by the sounds of everyday life, conversations, laughter, the hiss of the espresso machine, but feeling like they were the only two people in the world. When they finally separated, Elena was smiling the uninhibited smile that Marcus had come to treasure above everything else. So, she said, I guess we're really doing this. What exactly are we doing? Building something honest and real and lasting. Starting with the truth and seeing where it takes us. Marcus thought about the months of anonymous gifts, the nights of wondering and hoping, the fear that had kept him hidden in the shadows. All of that had led to this moment, sitting in bright sunlight with Elena, no secrets between them, nothing hidden or held back. I can't think of anything I'd rather be doing, Marcus said. Good, Elena replied, because I'm going to need someone to help me set up my new office. And I have it on good authority that you're excellent at creating comfortable workspaces. Marcus laughed, remembering all those anonymous gifts and adjustments he'd made to her hospital office. I think I can manage that. Number more hiding, though, Elena said, squeezing his hand. From now on, we do everything together, in the light. Number more hiding, Marcus agreed, finally understanding that the best connections aren't built in shadows, but in the brave choice to be seen. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.